ॐ ज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चाक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नामश्रेष्ठं मनुमापि सच्चिपुत्रं मद्रास्वरूपं रूपं तस्याग्रजमुरुपुरीं माथुरीं गोष्ठावतीं राधाकुण्डं गिरिवरं महो राधिकमधावसम् प्राप्तयश्च प्रतित्तकृपाया श्रीगुरुं तं नतोऽस्मि। वञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पवानेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। निखिलाश्रुतिमौले रत्नमालदिति निराजिता पदपङ्कजन्ता आजिमुक्तकुलैरुपश्यामनं परितस्त्वं हरिणां संश्रयामि। अनार्पितचरीं चिरात् करुणयावतीर्णा कलहो क्षमार्पयितुमुन्नतोष्वलरासं स्वभक्तिश्रियम् हरिपुरतः सुन्दराभिवृद्धिकदम्बसन्दीपितः सदा हृदये स्फुरतो वा सचिनन्दनः। अजानुलम्बिता भुजो कनकावदातो सङ्कीर्तनायकपितरो कमलायतक्षो विश्वम्भरो द्वियावरो जुगधर्मपालो वन्दे जगत्प्रियकरो करुणावतारो लादिनी शक्तिस्वरूपाय गौरङ्गसुहृदाय च शक्तिप्रदनाय गदाधर नमोऽस्तु ते। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कान्त राधा कान्त नमोऽस्तुते। राधे वृन्दावनाधीशे करुणामृतवाहिनी कृपया निजपादब्जा दर्शनमयं प्रदीयतम्। भक्त्या विहीनाय अपराधलक्षये क्षिप्तश्चाकमादितरङ्गमाध्ये कृपामयि त्वं शरणं प्रपन्नं वृन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दं वृन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दम्। श्री सच्चिनंदन गौर हरि की जय, श्री हरिनाम प्रभु की जय, समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय, सेंट फ्रांसिस की जय, लवर्न की जय, स्टिग्मात की जय, गौर प्रमान हरि हरि बोल। Good morning to all. Pranam. Hoping you had good resting. So today we are traveling to Assisi in a few hours, but before that we want to reflect a little bit on the concept of stigmata today. We are at the place of the stigmata here, Taverna. Yesterday we tried to introduce the life and teachings of Saint Francis as well as that of Mahaprabhu and the many connections between both. There are so many more. And today, after being properly introduced a little bit to both of them in terms of their life journey, I wanted to concentrate with or without your permission on the notion of stigmata and how that plays out not only in the life of Saint Francis here at La Verna, but also in the life of Mahaprabhu, and how that can play itself out in our life. No? Because again, we don't want just to appreciate the life of other people like a distant, glorious figure without relevance to our own journey. So how the stigmata translates into our own life journey. So, as we explained yesterday, in both Saint Francis and Mahaprabhu, love becomes embodied. We said Saint Francis was the gospel performed, so to say, walking gospel, if you want to put it that way. Mahaprabhu was Bhagavatam danced, personified. There was their living commentary, ongoing living commentary. Love fully incarnated, if you will, which is something very important to embody to hear about the embodiment of these concepts, because sometimes many of us live what we will call a disembodied spirituality. As we were talking last night, in terms of sometimes we are more about rejecting things that integrating and embodying things. So both Saint Francis and Mahaprabhu are figures that bring lots of grounding to our life, of embodiment, if you want to use the word incarnationalism. Sometimes that's the term used. So in the case of Francis, of course, his love for Jesus somehow culminates in the stigmata. Stigmata, the word stigmata is Latin for plural for marking. So it will be stigmata because he has 5 markings. Basically stays for marks or for brands, like branding. So stigmata means that basically. There are 5 markings in the body of Saint Francis: 2 in the feet, 2 in the hands, and 2 on the right side of the rib, you say? On this side, which are the same markings that Jesus had on the cross because of being crucified and because of being lashed on this side. So one says the stigmata is like the culminating climatic event in the life of Saint Francis, if you want to put it, which will happen 2 years before he passed, as we heard the other day. And the stigmata, as it has been said already, is a form of a seal of approval or a wound of love. In one sense, both are synonymous. When you are approved, you will be wounded by love. Love comes and leaves its wound. Is not a bad word. No? I'm using the word wound to begin with, just we can normalize this. We will try to see the beauty in the wound, so to say. So, seal of approval comes with the marking of love. And similarly, in Mahaprabhu's life, and we'll be going back and forth between Saint Francis and Mahaprabhu as we are trying to do these days, we find different markings, external markings, embodied markings that confirm the presence of divine love, the overflowing of divine love, in his case, his empathy and identification with the love of Sri Radha, Mahaprabhu being Krishna, and becoming them visible in his body. One way to talk about that is what Rupa Goswami has described as Sattvic Bhav, or sometimes it's called as specifically Asta Sattvika Vikar. Asta Sattvika Vikar means something like eightfold bodily transformations. Let's keep it simple. Vikar means transformation, Ashta means 8, and Sattvika means bodily or existential, like affecting your sense, your body in this case. No? Which are, I'm having here, they're just not to forget it. One of them is trembling, one of them is tears, one of them is paralysis, like being stunned, one of them is perspiration, fainting, change of complexion, faltering voice, like choked voice, and horripilation, which means like bodily hairs standing on end. Probably all of us know the symptoms, but not precisely in the context of ecstatic divine love, and maybe watching a horror movie or something like that. So Mahaprabhu is said to have shown all of this, sometimes separately, sometimes simultaneously, as we will see a quote in a moment. And even Rupa Goswami, who defines these different symptoms, he will say, and there are a few others which are even more rare than this ache, but they are so rare you won't basically find in anyone, so I won't spend time in defining them in detail. Like perspiring blood, which Mahaprabhu exhibited. And again, perspiring blood, that starts to sound very similar to Francis' stigmata in its own way. So again, the idea here is that both these ecstatic symptoms are not merely things for us to admire from a distance, but to understand that they reveal a deeper mystery, which is that when divine love becomes present, when divine love invades, so to say, captures the totality of our being, it no longer remains like a doctrine or a theology or even an emotion, merely an emotion, but it enters the whole body and it marks the person. Right? So what's happening inside is so much that the outside starts to reflect that in so many ways. And in many Vaishnava traditions, interestingly, there's this also tradition of branding the body. For example, in initiation, like if you go to the Ramanuja Sampradaya, talk to some members of the Sri Sampradaya, he told me, one of them, he told me it's optional, but when you are get initiated, they brand your body. No? Optional, but with the names of Vishnu, Narayan, etc. I think Shankar. Okay, with the symbols.
They even renew it.
Okay, that's hopefully that's optional. Probably we'll see. But it's a branding. In our tradition, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he describes also 5 elements in initiation. One of them is branding, but with chandan. So it's a more gentle branding. But the point of all this is that all that is preparing us for the ultimate branding. When divine love comes, your whole body will become naturally marked by that. So when you are getting initiated, it's a way of officially beginning your life of surrender, and surrender is the foundation of divine love. So there is a corresponding branding to that. That may need to be renewed. That's still not permanent. When divine love enters in a fixed, permanent way, the whole body becomes, we will say, ornamented by those markings, adorned. Stigmata, we could say, also is an alankar, an ornamentation. Tears, all the sattvic bhavs are like the real transcendental makeup. Which is funny because in many leelas of the gopis, they've actually put makeup for Krishna, but then because of their love for Krishna, tears come and they appear to Krishna being a complete mess. And that's in one sense that was the ultimate fulfillment of their makeup, right? So that's a paradox. So anyhow, here both the stigmata of Saint Francis and the ecstatic symptoms of Mahaprabhu, again, their bodies become a kind of scripture. Again, as we were saying yesterday, in how they embodied the gospel, how they embodied the Bhagavatam. Their bodies become like a text, maybe not written in ink, but written in tears, blood, perspiration, trembling, longing. Their body becomes its own living testimony, its own living revelation. They embody the gospel, they embody the Bhagavatam. This is another way to speak about the same. So, to become poetic, we could say that the great master becomes love's visible handwriting. They become handwritten by love. So, do you see them in even if they are not, even if they are not showing these markings externally, obviously, the way they are living inside, that becomes the handwriting of love in them, right? So let's go for a moment to what happened in here, where we are now, Laverna, and the Stigmata, and how that took place. Though Brother Roshan mentioned that briefly the other day. So Laverna, this place, we could call it, as I was talking the other day with Krishna Chandra Prabhu. Some of you may know him. And actually, he sent a message for the pilgrims here. I will be sharing that in the WhatsApp group. Because he wanted to come, and I invited him, but he couldn't. So we'll have to go and visit him in Atandatam, what to do, right? And he was telling me how, Laverna is the stigmata stali of Saint Francis. No? So stali in Sanskrit it means like a place. So we hear generally the term Bhajan stali, which will be like the place where a saint will sit and perform his or her bhajan or deep inner practice. So here is the stigmata stali, the place where Francis received the stigmata, but also it's Francis Bhajan stali, because you don't receive stigmata if there's no bhajan. So as we heard from Brother Roshan, he will come here, Francis, at least once in a year and spend at least 40 days, considerable time of the prayer, silence, absorption. So bhajan, we'll call in our tradition. In one sense, we can make some parallel to some degree with Mahaprabhu's time in Gambhira, deep bhajan stali there. So again, this is Saint Francis Bhajan stali, place of bhajan, and then naturally, because of that, becomes the stigmata stali. So you can go to the nuns in breakfast and explain the concept of stigmata stali. So this is a place where, the seal of approval came as a result of Saint Francis's Bhajan, basically inner adoration life, prayer life. So this happened in September 1224. So it's almost this year they're celebrating 800 years of Saint Francis' disappearance. So 2 years ago was 800 years from the Stigmata anniversary, so to say. So this happened, as I say, 2 years before Saint Francis' death. And as we say yesterday night, Saint Francis, or as we were told the other day, Saint Francis on a place like this, he was praying intensely and he was absorbed in contemplation and the desire to bear the wounds of Christ on himself, accompany him in his compassionate suffering for the whole of humanity in the context of divine love. Again, there's no masochistic idea, because I know that the symbol of the cross can be read in so many ways that sometimes can be scary or very negative, but it's it contains all the positive elements of love and compassion and the suffering that come from that. So again, his longing was not only to admire Christ, to say, oh, how nice, like some Christians will do, let's not be honest. Thank you for suffering for us. Thank you for bearing, I'm saved because of you. How they say it? I know. We read some cross in the United States, like blood secure redemption, or something. No pain, your pain, my gain. Yes. Your pain, my gain. Stuff like that, right? So it's like, okay. There's not much willingness to participate in that. So that's not Francis, just to bring a contrast. Francis was not even admiring the cross. He wanted to participate in that. He wanted to enter into that portal. He saw Christ and the cross as a portal to enter. Like we say yesterday, a form of raganuga, form of following a particular person, particular mood, wanted to enter there in a participatory way, in a committed way. Again, not just admiring that from a distance, thank you so much, good, but not me. But I want to enter there. So he desired to feel in some mysterious way that the suffering that Jesus experienced at the cross while being crucified. So according to Bonaventure, which is one of the main also founders of the order, Francis that day saw the crucified Christ, had darshan, we will say, had a spurti, has a vision, a revelation, and at that moment the markings that Jesus had came on his body, on his 2 feet, his 2 hands, his right rib. And that became known as the first known case in Christian history of what now we call stigmata. Nobody before, except for Jesus, had bared those wounds. So that was the first case in Christian history, not the last, interestingly enough. That will take another conversation to go through many other cases, even contemporary cases like Father Pio and others who lived last century. That there are pictures and videos of him, like he also had the stigmata and so on and so on. They live with that till the end of their life. Remember, this was not a temporary one that needed to be like, again, renewed every year. Those were open wounds that did not close. So they were not bearing a healed wound with scar tissue, but that was open wounds till they passed. So that's the price to pay for it, basically. So there are contemporary cases of that. So in some way of parallel version, Yamuna was reminding me the other day, in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, we have this interesting case of Shyamananda Pandit, who received his own form of stigmata. A disciple of Hridaya Caitanya, and at one point he found an ankle bell in Seva Kunj when he was sweeping, and he put it on his forehead to honor it, and it left a mark in him. And that became the tilak of his lineage. Of course, some people didn't believe him and all this back and forth, and eventually that marking stayed there. So it's its own form of stigmata, of Radha taking him as her own, basically. As we were talking yesterday, belongingness. Saint Francis wanting deeper belonging, we could say that those are okay. You come to my inner circle, so to say. And as we heard the other day, also Francis made a concerted effort trying to hide the wounds. Like did many of these mystics. Again, we are invited to Narottam Das Thakur will say, which as we were talking with Pradhana Gopi, he would be another beautiful parallel with Saint Francis in many ways. He will say, you try to hide the results of your bhajan. Don't make that public. Don't make a show of your realizations and that. So Saint Francis tried to wear long sleeves to hide like the markings of his hand, to cover. He was limping, you say, because of the bleeding on his feet. So he tried like to conceal the limp as much as you can conceal a limb with a permanent wound like that. But gradually his associates like became aware of, like, because at the beginning, well, maybe he hurt himself here, he hurt himself there, but he hurt himself in 5 particular parts that coincide. Those markings match the wounds of our master. So at that, gradually they realized, it's not that St. Francis came and announced to all the community, hey guys, I have Stigmata. I'm the first one in Christian history. Let's put it in the register so we get exclusivity. He was just hiding all that. Longing for that, but when it came, hiding all that. I want to take attention to himself, out of humility, of course, publicizing the event. But they realized that. And it became known as the Stigmata. Similarly, Mahaprabhu, again, will show all these symptoms of love, but he will say, I have no love for Krishna. I know, but you have so much. No, all this love I'm showing is just a show. Actually, I have no love. If I will have love, I will die. Because if you really love Krishna, you die in separation of him. The proof that I am alive still is a proof that I have no love. Then each one in their own way, we're trying like to conceal, or we will say like the nature of love is so humbling, as we always say, that you generally feel I have no love. It's not that Mahaprabhu was lying. You generally feel I have no love because there's so much more love to be served. That whatever you have is never the totality of it, because there is no such a thing as the totality of it. It keeps expanding its horizons. But anyhow, somehow or other, out of humility, they try to keep that low profile, as Sanatana Goswami quotes a verse in Hari Bhakti Vilas, Gopayed Ishtadaivatam, Gopayed Gururatmana, Gopayed Nijamalikam, Gopayed Chaniyamantram. And I'm saying those in different order. He's saying, hide your Ishtadev, hide your Guru, hide your mantra, hide your Malika, hide everything. In terms of, do not make a public show for public consumption. This is something intimate and private. So this stigmata, in one sense, came as a result, we mentioned that the other day, of a concept that is quite dear for me and to some of us at least, which is Tadatmia. So Tadatmia means literally like oneness, but a oneness that doesn't cancel the individuality. So it's like a sameness, a nearness, but preserving the one. So you identify so much with something that you kind of merge with that something while still retaining who you are, like the very famous example of the iron bar put in fire. So the iron bar remains iron bar but becomes fire-like. So by identification in love, Saint Francis entered into the experience of Christ to the point that he became Christ-like, if you want to put it that way. He became tadatmic with Jesus. Identification, loving identification, mystical empathy in love. And we have different examples in our tradition. For example, in the first verse of Bilab Kusumanjali of Raghunath Das Goswami, there is a prayer where one of the gopis is witnessing Radha's interaction with Krishna. There's more intimate pastimes in Madhurya Rasa. And by this manjari witnessing, there is a description of a love bite, where the lips are beaten in the loving battle between them two, and there's a wound. And the manjari, by witnessing that happening in Radha's lip, she has that wound herself. By fully identifying with the experience of her Swamini or her mistress, she appears having the same wound herself. So again, we can call that our Gaudiya version of stigmata, being there of when the gopis, when Krishna disappears in the Rasa Lila, different ways of speaking about Tadatmia. And the gopis start imitating all the Lilas of Krishna among themselves. So out of deep Tadatmia, deep identification with the object of their affection. They still remain themselves. It's not that even though they say, I'm Krishna, I'm doing that, but they are themselves. They are not Krishna. They are doing that in the concept of loving Krishna. The more they say, I am Krishna, I'm lifting Govardhan, their love for Krishna is increasing. So they are not kind of merging into Brahman or becoming one of the absolute, but it's a particular, unique kind of loving madness in Tadatmia. Or Mahaprabhu himself. Mahaprabhu is a very complex theological figure because though his main purpose was to do Tadatmia or empathize with Radha's heart, at times he also shows Krishna Bhav. He's in the mood of Krishna, sometimes in the mood of Baraha, sometimes in the mood of Nrsimha, sometimes he's in the mood of Balaram. Sometimes even we could argue he's tasting Manjari Bhav in a few leelas. So he's doing Tadatmia in so many directions. Right? So Mahaprabhu is the God of Tadatmia, the God of empathy. He's being empathic with so many different moods of the divine and exploring them. Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai. Why not? So in our tradition, we speak a lot, going back to the notion of stigmata as a wound. Again, let's normalize the word wound. There's nothing wrong with crisis. There's nothing wrong with crisis, vantage, turning point, vantage point. Wound is an opening. No, it's an opening. So what do you do with the opening? It's up to you. But it's an opening. So what? We decide. So in our tradition, we hear repeatedly our God being wounded by love. It's a very vulnerable notion of the divine. Yeah, the all supreme controller, master, omniscient, everything, but wounded by love. When we speak more intimately, we'll say many leelas where Krishna is described. Of course, sometimes he's described as Cupid. No? They're all attractive. But when you go deeper, you realize, Krishna, known as Cupid, he's cupified himself. He's cupidized, right? He becomes wounded by the arrows of love, to use this Cupid-like language. In many leelas, Krishna is described as wounded by rather silent glances that are like arrows shooting on him, and he becomes like collapses, faints, loses awareness. That's the whole meaning of Kama Gayatri, ultimately. No? This Kamadev, Krishna, the god who conquers the other Kamadev, the Cupid of this world, becomes Kama-defied by Radha. No? Krishna is Madan Mohan, who conquers Cupid. Sri Radha is Madan Mohan, Mohini. The conqueror, Krishna is Madan Mohan, the one who conquers everyone in this world. Cupid is conquering everyone, Cupid personifying selfish love, let's put it that way. Cupid conquers everyone, Krishna is the one who conquers, he who conquers everyone, and Radha is she who conquers, he who conquers everyone. Right? So we hear a lot this idea of our God being conquered by love, wounded by those arrows. But it's a glorious wounding. It's a desirable one. So in Mahaprabhu, as we know, we have Krishna himself appearing with the mood, avesh, inner absorption, and the external complexion of Radha. Avesh and besh. Besh means like an outer garments or outer color, and avesh means internal absorption, to make a play of words. So he comes to taste her love for him, the depth of her love for him. He's curious about that, deeply curious about that. So in one sense, Mahaprabhu's ecstatic states, stigmata, ecstatic symptoms on the outside that we can see are disclosing Radha's love, Radha's feeling for love for him as Krishna. And that appears on the outside. Again, let's try to keep the balance between what's going on inside and how that shows on the outside. And that becomes especially intense during his last 12 years in Puri, at least in his earthly leelas. As I mentioned before, he's showing all these 8 Satvika Vikars, sometimes separately, sometimes together. I like to read you one section of the Caitanya Charitamrita where it describes very interestingly, very poetically, how all the symptoms are like erupting in Mahaprabhu's body during, I think this is during the Ratha Yatra festival, which was always a very special ecstatic moment for Mahaprabhu. This is Caitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 13, verses 101 to 110. Fasten your seatbelts again. When Mahaprabhu jumped and danced, he was wonderfully transformed, as all 8 Sattvika Bhavs, these 8 transformations, simultaneously erupted in him. So Mahaprabhu is known sometimes as the golden volcano of divine love. So these golden volcanoes are erupting in 8 different ways at the same time. You want to be there to be sprinkled by that lava, right? The hair on his body stood on end, and his body appeared like a smooth silk tree with thorns. No? Hairs on his body like thorns. Right? Seeing his teeth chattering, people fear his teeth will fall from his mouth. Blood poured like perspiration from his pores. Stammering, he called to Jagannath. He couldn't complete the word in ecstasy, choking. His eyes poured forth water like a fountain, drenching everyone on all sides. In view of everyone, his hue changed from golden to reddish brown to the color of a jasmine, whitish. Sometimes he was stunned, and sometimes he rolled on the ground. His limbs became hard like sticks of dry wood and did not move. Losing his breath, he fell to the ground, and seeing this, the devotees lost their own life breath. Seeing their master losing their breath, they lost their breath. Tears poured from his eyes, mucus ran from his nose, and foam poured from his mouth like streams of nectar falling from the moon. Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai. So that's intense, right? I mean, on the outside, most people will call the ambulance and will be horrified and will run away and will not know what to do. But yeah, the whole system is somehow not only being marked, but it's like collapsing because of so much happening on the inside, right? So again, all this can be seen as a Vaishnava parallel to stigmata. Maybe not identical in form, again, though there is blood perspiring through the pores, not only 5 markings, but as many pores as you have. But it's very similar, very similar in principle. So in both cases, the transcendental emotion is impressing the body by way of Tadatmia, by way of loving identification. And there is another interesting term in Sanskrit that could be parallel to stigmata or connected, which is udipana. Just to mention that. Today's class is a little bit more technical. Udipana, which translates like a stimulant or excitant. Something that creates and excites you in some way. Stimulant. Okay. Which is kind of a counterpart to stigmata, because udipana means I see something outside and that touch me inside. Like, for example from this world, let's put it that way. Like a father, I don't know, his son went on vacation for 3 months, and when the son returns, the father is outside of the house is returning here, and he sees his son's shoes on the door, which means son is back. Boom. Now, that triggers in the father's an emotional response. So that will be, the shoes act as an udipana. You understand the example? Of course, we have udipanas in the transcendental realm, like Krishna's flute sound or this or that, right? Trigger. Okay, let's use the word trigger. No, that's a trigger, and the powder is inside the heart of the person, so to say. No? So stigmata is the other way around, we could say. I've seen so much inside that thing starts to manifest on the outside. Starts to overflow, and it starts to become evident in my body. But it's they are connected to each other somehow. So anyhow, so far we have been talking about 2 forms of what we will call sacred wounding. Saint Francis is bearing the wounds of Christ's crucifixion, and we could say Mahaprabhu is bearing the wounds of Radha's separation. Okay? Because that's Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu is Krishna, tasting the mood of Radha, and the entry point is love in separation. So Francis bearing the wounds of Christ's crucifixion, Mahaprabhu bearing the wounds of Radha's separation. Francis' love is saying, Jesus, let me suffer with you. And Mahaprabhu's love is saying, Radha, let me feel how you love me. Now, slightly different angle, but similar willingness to empathize with the other person's feeling. One side, Jesus, let me suffer with you. On the other side, Krishna as Mahaprabhu saying, Radha, let me know how you love me. So I can get a glimpse of that and I can try to respond in a better way, because Krishna feels eternally indebted to that. Like, you're loving me so much and I'm eternal debtor. So maybe getting to know more, getting more acquainted with the quality of your love for me, I can try to return the embrace in a better way. And in both cases, their love is paradoxical. Like every love, genuine love is paradoxical, which means each love entails its own form of suffering, right? So in love, there is a form of sweet suffering. Yes, sweet suffering. Suffering can be sweet. Doesn't make sense to our mental calculator, but suffering can be sweet. It's paradoxical. And we all have an experience of that, even compassion in this world. You see someone suffering, you become tadatmic with that person. You empathize with that person, you start to suffer. But this is suffering that is enlarging your heart. And it's allowing you to love on a deeper level. So you are loving more and suffering more. In love. So the goal of life is not to stop suffering. The goal of life is to love, which includes suffering. But not the suffering, the miserable, so to say, suffering that comes without love. So the suffering without love is suffering, real suffering, because there is a lack of love. The real suffering is not loving. Because when you love, even suffering becomes sweet and enlarges your heart. So as painful as they seem, the stigmata in Saint Francis, the limping, the bleeding, all the symptoms in Mahaprabhu, these are wounds of love. Caitanya Charitamrita says, Krishna says, Bahya Biswa Jalahai Bhitari Anandamoy Krishna Premirat Bhuta Charit. On the outside, these symptoms of love look like poison, he will say. No? Poor Mahaprabhu rolling on the ground, hitting his head, mucus, blood, foam, Saint Francis stigma, all those seems like poison. But on the inside, this is filled with ananda. This is filled with the bliss of love. Krishna Premir Adbhuta Charit. These are the astonishing attributes of divine love. So I will say that real love encompasses and includes all emotions, and that secures love as not sentimental. I would say that if we want to love without any form of suffering, probably that's a form of sentimentality. I just want to enjoy love. I just want to experience that, but it's not so committed. Divine love is not sentimental. It is blissful, but it is not painless. But the pain doesn't come from isolation and selfishness, but comes from genuine connection with others' pain. It is ecstatic, divine love, but it is not easy. It is not impossible. It's just difficult, and the point. And the wounds of love open the heart beyond its ordinary capacity. So that's an important point when we speak about wounds in divine love. The purpose of the wound is to open the heart beyond its normal capacity, beyond its daily operation. I think we all can give some testimony of that in our lives. On a daily basis, we operate on a certain level of breadth of heart. Our heart opens to some level. And sometimes unexpectedly, you are in a situation where you are like broken, torn apart, open, and your heart is like, okay, now you can enlarge your capacity to give your heart. I have a quote that I like to share with you from Teresa of Avila, who is a very famous Christian mystic, from a book called The Book of My Life, speaking about wounding and wounding in love and arrows and all this sacred imaginary. She says, sometimes an arrow of love pierces the heart and penetrates the deepest core of the soul, so that she doesn't know what has happened or what she wants, except that all she wants is God. She feels like the arrow has been dipped in a poisonous herb that makes her reject herself for love of God, and not in a toxic way reject yourself. right? Self-forgetfulness in divine love. She will gladly give up her life for God. It is impossible to explain the way God wounds the soul or to exaggerate the agony it causes. It makes the soul forget herself entirely. Yet this pain carries such exquisite pleasure that no other pleasure in life can compare to that happiness. The soul longs to die of this beautiful wound. Saint Teresa of Avila Ki Jai. So again, that's deeply paradoxical because the first part looks like, I don't want that. That's so deep, so painful, but at the same time, so blissful. Caitanya Charitamrita speaks very similarly. It speaks about divine love as poison and nectar mixed together. Like, it's killing me, but it's so sweet. But it's killing me, but it's so sweet. But it's killing me, but it's so sweet. Or sometimes it gives this example of hot sugar cane. Hot burning sugar cane. So it's burning my mouth, it's burning me like a wound, open wound, like pain. But it's so sweet, I can't give it up. Dilemma, eternal dilemma. So again, the word for all this is paradoxical. It's not a problem to solve. It's not like, how can I figure out to keep having the sweet part without having the burning part, without having the poisonous. The poison is not something negative. Again, it's its own way of expressing something. But at the end of the day, it's paradoxical. So we need to, more and more, if we want to be mystics, as we were talking yesterday, we need to enter into another way of describing a mystic is someone who sees life and lives life in paradoxical terms and can accommodate this paradox that otherwise may look contradictory. So the wound of love is not opposed to joy. Okay? Wounding is not opposed to joy, but it includes pain. But it includes every other emotion as well. Like Rupa Goswami, he gives these secondary rasas. Secondary rasa includes fear, includes compassion, which includes suffering, includes disgust, but also includes laughter and wonder and this and that. So it includes everything. No? Nothing is to be excluded. Again, we don't need to reject anything. Love has enough hosting capacity to keep all the emotional spectrum in place, in eternity, in the service of Bhagavan. That's the all-encompassing nature of love. If it doesn't make any sense to us now, that's not because love makes no sense, but because we are in nonsense still. So to say, we still to live a more senseful life to make sense of love in its own way. So love will bring wounds. Like Saint Francis, going back to Saint Francis again. Out of love, Saint Francis identified with Jesus' wounds, with Jesus' suffering, and that created its own wound in him. But those wounds, that suffering expanded Francis' heart. So we can see like the sequence. Out of love, you empathize that there's suffering. That suffering creates wounds. Those wounds open the heart for more love, and that love will create again other type of wounds and suffering, and that expands the heart and bring more love. No? You know this symbol? Ad infinitum, perpetually. So it's a sequence when one takes us to the other over and over again. Again, you pay attention to the daily dynamics, as I like to say sometimes, of Radha and Krishna in the Leela. I mean, in separation of each other, they are dying, literally. They feel, I'm dying, I cannot survive with it. That's painful. Not the pain we are accustomed to experience. Again, try to make that separation, because if not, you will think, I don't want to go there. I don't want to suffer, I just want peace, and I want relief from suffering. And we understand there's a foundation that we need some peace. But for us, peace is just the beginning of the conversation. You're just warming up. Peace is more like a removal from the negative side, moving from negative numbers to zero. Okay, good. But there is a whole bunch of positive numbers after zero. 108 minimum and more. So, in our tradition, Sri Radha is dying on a daily basis, separation from Krishna, and Krishna dying from her, and everyone else dying by witnessing their dying. Nobody dies, there is no final tragedy. But as I like to say, in our tradition, if we want to serve them intimately, our daily service will be to save their lives, basically in separation from one another. Who am I? Nobody. But by grace, our eternal service will be to save God's life on a daily basis. And for that, you have to empathize with their suffering. You have to develop this skill and capacity to be tadatmic and empathic of what's going on the other person. If not, you will be like, what to do here? I don't know what to do. Where's the ambulance here in Golok Vrindavan? No, there's no ambulance. You are required there. So all this is preparation for that. That said, I'd like to go to a final part, which is more how this relate to us where we are now, because many of the above examples of stigmata and sattvic bhavs may feel inspiring aspirationally, as I say the other day, but still may feel like a little bit long-term from where we are, right? So how can we relate to the notion of stigmata in a or sacred wound from where we are, in a realistic place, in a relevant place? Because we don't want also to fall into cheap imitation of something so sacred. No? Yeah, let's bring the whips, as we were saying the other day, right? So again, Francis and Mahaprabhu both became like examples to their followers, but their states cannot be just copied. We have Anukar versus Anusar. Anukar means imitating, doing what the other one is doing. And Anusar means following the footsteps or following the essence of what they are doing according to where I am. So we are not being asked to produce stigmata. Come on, bleed, guys. We are not being asked to imitate Mahaprabhu's ecstasies. We are not asked to do that because we cannot do that. Even if someone tells you, come on, show the wounding. I mean, that wounding at least, I cannot do it. We cannot just imitate that. But we are being asked, and that's an important point, we are being asked to let that same love become real in us in our own measure. No? They were touched by love in a certain way, and we are being asked to be touched by that same thing called love in our own way and in our own capacity to bear love, so to say. And this is clear in Mahaprabhu's Ecstatic, for example. That is 8 verses, which is a sequence, a gradual sequence that gets deeper and deeper. And only in the 6th verse, we hear Mahaprabhu say, Nayanam galada shrudaraya bhadanam gadgadajurudayajra. He started to explain how he's going through all these sattvic bhavs. That's the 6th verse, which has to do with bhava bhakti. Before that, Mahaprabhu is starting somewhere else, right? I have no attraction for the name. No? Let's learn humility for the grass. Then we can talk about shedding tears like oceans and stuff like that. That's clearly somewhere else. So again, we are being asked to relate to this in a relevant way. In fact, interestingly, when Francis was living, as we say these days, he will be such a radical example of Jesus' life but nobody could follow him in that same way. I mean, he was too much. They tried their best, but for many, especially after Francis' passing, was like there was a debate like how to follow Francis in a way that is functional for us. How much can we literally imitate the degree to which he's worshiping, adoring his goddess poverty, for example? As you can see now, the Franciscan monks are not exactly like Francis, wearing just like a ragged bag on top and walking barefoot, and like they have tried in time to realize, okay, we cannot imitate him. We are deeply touched and inspired, but maybe how someday we can reach that, but how to make this sustainable and still be Franciscans, so to say. So in the same way with Mahaprabhu, most of Mahaprabhu followers have always been very careful about sahaja. Like we don't want cheap imitationists. We cannot just fake tears, be there before we are actually there, right? So again, the point here is not to imitate the wound. In this case, we are talking about wound, but to become available to the love that made the wound possible. Again, as I said before, the point is not to imitate the wound, blood, come on and bring some knife or some whipping, but how much can I become available to that love, that same love that made the wound possible in these persons? Hmm? The corresponding wound to our current need, in other words. What's the level of love that I can deal with, and which is the corresponding wound that has to manifest in my own case. No? That's all about accepting my adhikar. Sve sve adhikari janishta saguna parikirtita. Accept where you are. That's real beauty. That's real adhikar. So how can we relate again realistically to the notion of stigmata where we are? So let's talk about, before speaking about the mystical wound, the wound of divine love, let's talk about our human wounds. For most of us, that may be the most relatable starting point. Because again, before speaking too quickly about these height states, we need to recognize our quote-unquote ordinary wounds, which properly dealt with, they are never ordinary, right? Grief, disappointment, shame, betrayal, trauma, loneliness, loss, long list. No? And the hidden injuries that they may be causing and they may be, that still may be shaping our way of loving, our attempt to love. If we, there may be, that may be affected by our wounds. And we are here at the place of Laverna, where Saint Francis was wounded with the stigmata, but we will say, to make him also human, Saint Francis was not first wounded in Laverna. If you know his life story, he had already been wounded in war, he has been wounded in his relationship with his father, he has been wounded in imprisonment, he has been wounded by the rejection of society and how they saw him. He has been wounded by his own brothers in his own community. Eventually, he has been wounded by the collapse of his former identity. There are lots of things to process there. Just to keep Francis also human and to make his story relatable to us. So all this makes the point that before our wounds becomes transparent to love, they must be recognized. We must name the wounds. We must hold the wounds, hold the wounds, and we must grieve the wounds. Grieving is crucial in everyone. So, and only then we can integrate them as part of our journey, when they have been properly named, framed, acknowledged, held, grieved. Then you can make that part of your realization, part of your story, part of your holy scar tissue. Let's put it that way. And of course, recently, some of you, before this retreat, some of you have been participating in a grief retreat. So those who have done so are at an advantage in the comparison with the rest of us in this connection, because you're carrying some momentum of that. And in this connection, I'd like to share a few words that Bhaktirasa shared at the introduction of the retreat. I never asked her permission, but I trust she will give it to me. And if not, let's transgress free will of my dear sister. So she shared very nice words that are very relatable to this point. Those of you who have been in the retreat have heard them. So it says, there is something deeply meaningful about gathering near the place where Francis of Assisi received the stigmata. For centuries, people have come to Laverna Sanctuary, not because it is a place of triumph or certainty, but because it is a place where suffering, solitude, prayer, and love met one another. It is a mountain of wounds, but also a mountain of tenderness. The wounds of Francis were never understood simply as injuries. They are marks of divine love and suffering united. Again, we cannot entirely separate the two. Whether one interprets that literally, symbolically, or devotionally, the place carries a long history of contemplation on the relationship between love and vulnerability. In some ways, grief itself is a kind of stigmata, our own human grief. Love that has marked us. It's a marking on the inside. Not a wound inflicted from outside, but a mark left by having loved deeply. Because if I'm wounded by something, that means I care for that something. So that's an indirect confirmation of my love. The pain remains because the love remains. If I wouldn't care, I would be indifferent. I'm not wounded. I'm not affected. Loss and love are not opposites. Pay attention to this one. Loss and love are not opposites. Love continues to evolve through loss, And sometimes loss becomes one of the very conditions through which love discovers a deeper expression. Call that union in separation, if you will. Loss and recovery. So in our Bhakti tradition, again, love is understood as a wound, not a pathological wound, but again, a wound, a sacred opening. Let's see wound as sacred opening. So wound does not mean mere trauma. Again, it's an opening created by love. An opening created to be, or an opening created to be filled by love. No? I'm wounded for whatever may be as a human being, psychologically, emotionally. There is an opening there. Okay, that opening is meant to be filled by love, whatever that may be. A wound can be damaged, we don't deny that, but also one can be, you have this word in English like aperture. Okay. At least in Spanish we have something like that. A place through which, an entry point, a place through which the infinite can enter us. Leonard Cohen will say, there is a crack in everything, that's where the light gets in. Mm-hmm. So the point is sometimes we deny the wound, so a wound that is denied becomes its own prison, right? It's not that the wound is a prison. The denial of the wound is a prison. But the one that is acknowledged is the one that allows the light to get in. It's the one that is brought into love, and that can become a doorway of its own. So there's nothing wrong with the one. And I'm saying that because we hear the word stigmata, and how we use the word in English, stigmatize, it always carries some negative connotation. So unconsciously, we don't want to have anything to do with that. And that in itself shows how much in denial we are with wounds and pain and confronting and naming them. So, and I don't want to be insensitive. I acknowledge some wounds sometimes close us, but other ones open us beyond ourselves. If we let them be, again, let it be. So it all depends how we react to them. The one is there, open, waiting for us to respond to that. Trauma is not necessarily bad. Trauma, I mean, I'm not promoting trauma, but trauma can be enlightening if we deal with that with proper guidance, with proper care. And at the same time, by contrast, divine love can be terrifying if we don't approaching it with the right stance. So if we have the right stance, everything can be nourishing and enlightening. So again, none of this presentation is a glorification of suffering for its own sake, right? We are not starting a masochist Gaudiya Vaishnava lineage here. Neither Saint Francis nor Sri Caitanya taught suffering for its own sake. Okay, Krishna Bhagavata says, "Susukam kartum." This process has to be practiced with joy, happily. But again, happily doesn't mean I only want to be happy. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to contact anyone. That's not what Krishna is saying there. But the idea is that even suffering, when it is received with love, can be transformed, can be joyful, can be nourishing, can be transformed, and can be transforming for whomever is around us. No? Again, our grief can become compassion. Our wounds can become a place of solidarity and empathy. As I like to make a play of words, our wounds can become wombs. No, the wound can become a womb through which something is born, something valuable, alive is born. So let me close with one little section, short, from my upcoming book, because I talked a lot about this. There is a whole section on suffering in my book, which is on unconditional love, but to make the whole book realistic and not just speak about unconditional love, we are love, but what to do with suffering. So the biggest section almost of the book is about that. Just one line. It says, redeemed suffering, because we all want to be redeemed from suffering, or maybe by suffering. Redeemed suffering is not suffering explained away. It is suffering inhabited by love. And the final lesson of any suffering is that love is more powerful than all pain put together. Basically that. So, just to conclude, going back to our original point, Saint Francis showing the wound of compassionate participation with the suffering of Christ. But interestingly, before that, there was deep longing in his heart to participate in that particular form. And Mahaprabhu shows the wound of divine longing and separation. But interestingly, that creates its own form of compassionate participation, of which all, in one sense, we are all here. We are all a consequence of Mahaprabhu's stigmata. Let's put it that way. Because his own inner experience and pain and separation exploded on the outside in the form of certain ways and movements that eventually became a movement. We became a part of that movement. But it all began with his own stigmata, so to say. And we are invited to participate in that, in one way or another. So again, we may not bear stigmata as Saint Francis did. We may not tremble and cry like Mahaprabhu in Gambhira. Relax, guys. You cannot force yourself to do that. But again, each of us have places where life has pierced us, so to say. So the question is, if those places will remain scars only, will remain some scars, or whether they can become opening through which love will flow. They will become wholly some scars, as we'll say in Sanskrit, making a play of words. Just some scars, or some scars, deeply emotional, devotional impressions. So that's up to each one of us how we want to relate to the world. So a few words on stigmata to have a broader look on that. And we'll do a little exercise before we go for breakfast. We have a few more minutes. Yeah? So I invite you to do this exercise. We're calling it again from wound to womb. So I will describe the exercise similar like we have been doing every morning. We'll gather in groups of 3. And each person takes a turn, as usual, speaking for 2 minutes or so. I have my gong here. I have my chronometer. I will let you know. Don't go too far. And the rest of the group, as usually, bears witness, simply listens, without interrupting, without advising, without wanting to change the other person, without commenting. And in this case, we will have 2 prompts, not 3, 2 prompts. The first one is, sorry, where is there a wound in me that I have mostly treated as damage? Where there is a wound in me that I have mostly treated as damage, but which may also be asking to be brought into love. That's the first one. Where is there a wound in me that I have mostly treated as damage, but which may also be asking to be brought into love? That's the first prompt. And the second one is, what kind of love? I will repeat them with the microphone eventually. You all have prompt 1? Can you say the last bit, please, again? Prompt 1. Where is there a wound in me that I have mostly treated as damage, right? Mere injury, but which may also be asking to be brought into love. Okay? Prompt 1. Prompt 2, and you will be with other people in the group who I trust also are writing that. So I will be repeating them. Second one, what kind of love, compassion, or new way of living? What kind of love, compassion, or new way of living might want to be born from that wound? What kind of love, compassion, or new way of living might want to be born from that wound? So first is identifying the wound, and then the second one is what kind of love, compassion may want to come from that. So I will pause the recording first before selecting the groups. Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Saint Francis ki jai, Stigmata ki jai.